I was going to ask you, how would you package mechanistic philosophy in humanistic terms?
I wouldn't know. It's contradictory.
Well, I see the mechanistic
It's
philosophy as very
humanistic. Yeah.
That's what I mean. It's concerned with humans.
It takes a long time for people to put that set together. Very difficult.
It's too obvious.
Unfortunately, I really don't know how to package it because the word has no meaning. What is a humanist? I never did know. Is a humanist one who owns nothing, who gives all the surplus to the poor?
One who's concerned with humanity.
In action or verbal?
No,
So you're talking about the
identity with the human race in action, an action pattern.
Does that mean they fight for wherever there's poverty and insufficiency and discrimination in the schools, or they're always there, you mean? Like Thoreau, who had a genuine concern, that type of thing? Is that a humanist?
No.
I don't know what a humanist is. I've never met one. I heard one. I've never met one that acted that way. There are a lot of verbal humanists. Too bad there's so much hatred in the world. Versus, yes, that's true. You're so right. This is verbal bullshit. Okay? It's only when you get off your ass and go out into the world and do things and make it a better place, and go to Africa and teach them whatever you can in agriculture, you can learn from them. When you do things, an activist, in the sense that you try to make the world a better place physically, and the rest falls on the yes.
Well, wouldn't there be, aren't there a lot of people around, like people who are into Jesus and things, who think they're actually doing that, and who are going out and trying to help people, but they're laying, heavy Christian
they're using their definition of help.
Well, that's why maybe you ought to try to
Christ
define that. I'd like you to define that.
Help?
Yeah.
Help is a process level that you superimpose upon people that ultimately changes them, let me say, in terms of their own ability to operate. So they can operate in the physical world better than they had been. Their efficiency ratio is picked up. But that takes time. But it doesn't have any concern, unfortunately. It doesn't have any concern with whether people like it or not. See, from this point of view, if we have to use a word like humanist, we are not concerned with whether people like this viewpoint or any other viewpoint. We're only concerned with whether or not there's useful bits in it. A physical example. Let's say you find out that a particular type of fruit harbors a particular type of insect that produces disorders of vision. And you went amongst a group of people and you told them that they should not store that fruit because when it's several days old, it breeds that type of bug that injures their vision. Now, you're not concerned with whether they like what you say or not. What you're concerned with is whether or not you could get that information across to them. Those persons, well, we've been living here for hundreds of years and we've never been bothered by the bug too much. We don't think it's the bug, we think it's the force of evil. Well, all you do is deliver what you have to say. That's the best you can do. Whether they like it or not is not the concern. The scientists never concern themselves with whether people like what they have to say or not. But they find out that overprotecting a child gives the child a low self-sufficiency at a later date. If you solve too many problems for your kids, then don't let them solve enough problems. They become less able to operate. So you tell parents what to do, how to go about it, or what to read, or you give them process level for going about it, but you're not concerned with whether they agree with you or not, because that is beside the point. In other words, if you, let's say, since you're new here, if you invented a flying machine, and I say it never worked, never get off the ground, you're not concerned with that, because you're dealing with an insufficient here in that area, you know what I mean? So you just go right on. So science has no regard for whether people like me or like you. Their only regard is whether people understand what they're talking about. See, like many scientists say, there are no gods, no devils, no supreme force out there. That the world operates and it has no purpose. There's no purpose to life, and no purpose to man, no purpose to anything. It's just one gigantic series of occurrences, neither good nor bad. From this point of view, there are no good people or bad people or right people or wrong people. There are people that are less effective and less efficient, and they don't operate too well, they're people that are not too happy. And they cannot achieve any other point of view unless they have knowledge about what the word happiness means. See, we use a lot of words, and I do here because there's no other way yet. The words like happiness have no meaning. They're relative. If you whip a slave 9 times an hour and someone just had mercy, and you only whip him once an hour, he says, you're a very merciful person. To him, from his deprivation, utter deprivation, you look like a good person. If you always throw a slave rotting food, and one day you throw a piece of non-rotting food, you say, what a merciful, wonderful person. Well, they'll never forget you till the day they die, because they've only known deprivation. So what people in this world call good and bad has to do with their own values. Do you think you'd follow that? We say that human beings also, given fast, cannot think or reason, that these are all mythical strategies, that there's no individuality, that man has no mind, he's a reflexive organism. He doesn't think. He can't, even if he wanted to. Meaning, in your terms, if you like music, if you really know your music and you listen to music, you can tell that the composer has been influenced by other composers of his period. There's no one that comes up singularly alone without any connection with knowledge of other people. No doctor comes up with a totally new medical approach to problems. It's always based upon what he's read, what he's heard about. So men are cumulative in knowledge. Is that all right?
I agree,
Right.
yes.
Women are also women because that's the patterns shoved upon them by society. That femininity and all this tight finger movement is all conditioned. If you were brought up by butch-type guys only, you never saw any girls, you cock your head and shut your fucking mouth. Depending on where you were brought up, that would be just as normal for you to speak that way as any other way. Now, an English major would be inclined to say that anyone that uses profanity, or a clinical psychologist might say that they haven't a sufficient vocabulary to handle gradations of linguistic shading, so they use the same 4-letter word every time. The 4-letter word is a useful thing because it's expressive of displeasure in its totality. In one instance, fuck you means I can accept nothing that you have to offer me, or I completely disagree with you. When a kid says to another kid, fuck you, it means I don't go that route. So some girl might say, oh, flub on that. That means fuck you. There's no bad words, it's just different words, and some people hang frames around it. Hey, this is a good word, and that's a bad word. So a nigger come here, and you say, don't, he's a member of the black race. So this doesn't change your set if you use a new word. A lot of people think that we use the right word. Some of my best friends are niggers, or some of my best friends are Jews, all this nonsensical thing. If people are prejudiced, it's very hard to erase prejudice by slogans. And you don't change people by calendar philosophy. The family that prays together, stays together, stitching time saves 9. All that does is occupy printing press time. But it doesn't do anything for people. And all of the Constitution of the United States, the Declaration of Independence is strictly a crock of shit. It's all on paper. It has no real translational meaning. And now, it's due to the fact that your society is conditioned to be insane. The whole of society. Your president, your vice president, your congressman, the whole slew of them. And that every school and every institution you go to is sick. When you walk out of this door tonight, you enter the real world, which is a sewer of values. And the most supreme expression of hostility is love. Just the opposite. It is in this sense. All right, you're going to make a lot of progress tonight. Okay.
That's called counter control.
We'll try to get to your question now. Can you frame it?
Bob and I, maybe Bob can frame it better than I can. Bob and I were talking about it in the phone. Maybe we were talking about Chomsky and verbal behavior and actual behavior. You remember what we were talking about?
Chomsky got a lot of TV time.
He did?
Oh, sure. Remember that brain movie?
Yeah, was he on that?
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember which one he was.
He was the older guy in the lab with the computers.
The white-haired
cat?
guy?
He's
Is
a
that the
younger
guy with
guy,
the cat?
Chomsky.
No.
Chomsky.
He's
Well,
younger.
when I was older, meaning about 35. Don't forget, you guys are all 17.
Oh.
Oh, the guy, he's just a kid. Anyway,
Maybe.
now what do you want to say about Chomsky?
No, we were talking about, well, I don't know if it's related to what we talked about here. It's very technical, and it's sort of a tricky type thing.
Oh, besides, it's very hard to arrive at a conclusion that compressed time. Yeah,
Do you remember what Chomsky was trying to say?
yeah, I kind of discredit it.
Could you
Oh,
lay it
right.
out? I'm just curious because he was mentioned in my psychology class too, and I would like to know how to counter that argument about language being innate.
Language being innate.
That's one of
Now
the
you're
things
getting
he
into semantic problems.
Right. I know.
You mean that language will evolve eventually in all things?
No, that
What do you-
each child, I think his premise is that each child possesses the potential propensity for language when he's born. Not propensity, that's this point of
He
view.
has the physical equipment to be able to
No, something
verbalize
inherited. Something
He has
inherited.
physical equipment,
No,
which is capable.
he projects more than that.
Like what?
He's born with
Like,
a
like, what do you
Physical
think?
equipment. Just trying to clarify, I think, what she wants to say. The sense of, say, of a bird flying. I don't know what your opinion is in the matter, but many people think that birds essentially are born to fly. That neurologically they have the circuits already built. There's some learning, but it would take the lifetime of most birds just to learn to take off before they learn. You know, if they're born with this type of thing, pre-wired, whatever. Chomsky says that, and there's a hard and soft position on it, that language in turn has this type of circuitry in the brain. Children are born with the ability, like when they hear something, to
Mimic?
hold it in their head. Like when you read, for example, when you read, you have to have a short-term memory that can relate context, like what you read in the sentence before. And
Each new word
integrate
doesn't
it.
erase the foregoing word.
Yeah, and human beings have a fantastic sensory capacity to discriminate very fine shades of sound, better than virtually any other animal. And so they're possessed with this equipment at birth that seems to be, from an evolutionary point of view, designed to, very optimally in fact, to operate with language techniques.
Yeah, well, you're right, it's too heavy to get into. I can only give you a brief on it, if you want a brief. That the bird has a structure of a certain kind. And prior to the bird cracking out of the egg, there are movements in the wings. There are movements in the legs, the neck. Animals move. And so, as they are moved, changes occur in the brain. If there's no movement at all, change will not occur, but there's always movement. And so, when the bird cracks through the egg, as it pecks, there's apparently a kind of a feedback, pecking, to the bird that's supported it. So the bird continues to peck, just like you might scratch an itch. The bird pecks, and is relieved, and then the eggshell cracks. But the bird does not peck at the eggshell to get out. There's this hard surface, and it pecks at it. And as the surface cracks, the bird just surprises you, and says, daylight. In other words, the bird doesn't peck to get out of the egg, because he doesn't know he's in an egg. You see what I mean? He couldn't know he was in an egg. No, if you make any assumptions about bird knowing he was in the egg, then you're getting metaphysical. You're going beyond reference. So it's a very difficult thing, this line here between physics and metaphysics, because some men make the line very thick, and they have other lines in between, and that's the twilight zone, where linguistic problems or language habits interfere with our getting through certain areas. Because I sit back and said, how does a pigeon know how to stall when it wants to land? It stalls before a branch. It doesn't go flying and bam right into the branch. It stalls. Well, how does it know how to stall? Well, when it doesn't know how to stall, it overshoots. And if it moves its wings the wrong way, it bangs its knee. So by turning the wings in different directions, it does do that. Until one direction minimizes the knee bang, Every time it sees a branch, the wing is turned to that angle, it minimizes the knee bang. Now let me say something to you about birds cannot be born with any pre-flight circuitry. I'll tell you what, they are only born with preliminary movements of the wings. And when they try to fly when the wings are too small, nothing happens. They fall. So they just move around. Then the wings become stronger. And the feathers branch out, spread out. And they begin to develop the musculature just by beating up and down. Why do they beat their wings, or how do they beat their wings? Because if you're supporting yourself all day on your legs walking around and you have adrenaline coming into the system, what happens is this is the least area that is like yawning. When you stretch like that, blood vessels in areas that have not received oxygen are now receiving oxygen. When you compress like that, a lot of areas are cut out. You've compressed a great deal. You can't take a deep breath. So when you get up like this and you take a deep breath, it feels good. Now, when the bird stretches, oxygen circulation goes through, and it feels good. But if he continues to stretch the wings, then it levels off. Then he moves his neck up and back, and that feels good. Then he moves his wings forward and back, and that feels good. And every angle, he turns his neck and pokes away at an itch, ruffles his feathers, and that feels good. If he doesn't, he stops doing it. That is, he gets positive feedback. So what happens then? The bird about to land, flying through the air, about to make a landing on something, assuming both eyes are focused at that point and stereoscopic vision is already established. It is not, it's established very early in a bird, very quickly too. And what happens, the bird sees the branch, the stereoscopic vision, the legs move out, the landing, the claws are flexed, ready to go. And because if they're not flexed properly, it overshoots. And you'll see birds do that. A lot of people don't watch that. I've seen many birds, especially, I think, I forgot what it's called, but its legs are too short, it can't make a good landing. Is it the condor?
Yeah.
When it comes in for a landing, it trips and falls head over heel.
That's the albatross.
Albatross, yeah.
Right. All right. Now, it's hard. All the albatross can do is leap like that and put its legs forward and still falls over. So God was a bad engineer, or what you call, if you made an airplane with the wheels about this small, so about this size, on say a B-17, or what do you call it, Boeing 707, made the wheels this size. When they hit the ground, they spin on 8,000 revolutions per minute, wham, burn right up. But they're too small. And you say, well, the engineer was bad. Well, God is a lousy engineer, because there's so many organisms that are utterly useless. And we have 80 vestigial organs in our body that we don't use, that are hanging around. And we have a large brain, which 80% of it is loaded with horseshit, nonsensical things. No Hail Mary, Mother of God, and the rest of that shit, which has no remedy. It has all kinds of stuff. So man has a larger brain, a sort of a larger garbage can, too. And man's concern is the prime thing. Of course, his concern is trained by society. I suggest you read Letters from Earth, Mark Twain. You read it? He does a good job of giving man a cerebral enema. Really cleans him up well. All right, so here's our problem. If man were able to do this, he would have to have a special society and a special design of the culture in order to achieve what I'm talking about now. And here's what man has to do. If we had to put it in law form, he has to stay away from words like love, warmth, understanding, decency, ethics, fair play, democracy. All those words murder man. Because once you say, I believe in democracy, everyone having the right to make their own decisions. Well, suppose I want to, let's try it for size. I'd like to build a multi-system of collapsed domes on top of a steel tube. I haven't got the money. So whatever I entertain up here, I can't do. You'd like a baby grand. Maybe you'd like a baby grand piano, or maybe you'd like a special acoustical piano, like a John Seashell, that can generate sounds upon sounds, having multiple speakers all the way down to the microscopic level of sounds. And they go through special amplifiers, and they're leveled off and filtered for noise. Let's assume you really knew your music, and you wanted to build a piano that would cost $80,000. It's yours in pure sounds only. You haven't got the money, so what good is being free? What's freedom? Freedom does, if you're a pinhead, and you always wanted a saw to saw some wood, you're free. look, I'm sawing wood. You're free. But anytime you read and you have knowledge and you want the world's best collection of books, you want a film collection of the history and development of plants, early studies, present studies, color, analytical studies of how the plant moves as it's growing. Say you want a terrific collection. You have the intellect, but you only got is $15 in the pocket, so you got nothing. So freedom has no meaning at all unless it can be translated. The dumber you are, the more freedom you have. Hey, man, look, Mom, I'm dancing. Well, that's why they teach people to dance, because it doesn't consume energy. That's why I have little kids swinging like that, because it uses up energy. It uses a lot of adrenaline, takes a lot of the attention away, and keeps the cerebral hemispheres from functioning. That the dances, football games, tennis, all the games are designed to occupy the insufficient time. So their head is occupied with going from one level of insufficiency to the other. All right, now freedom. Let's assume you wanted to build a new kind of sailboat. You don't have the money, you can't do anything. Let's say you wanted to know just how flies' wings are organized and how they move. You need a good microscope. You need sensitive electronic gear. If you don't have it, and you got a free mind, all you got is a brain that's jammed because you can't operate. Let's say you want to study ballet. You want to go to France to study. You haven't got the money, but you have the potential. But they've got 400 girls with potential. They make a decision. They leave you out. So your freedom isn't worth a shit. Let's say you have dramatic ability, but the director wants to get into your pants, and you don't want to go to bed with him. And what happens to your freedom? You got a lot of problems. It isn't just as simple as that. So you can take all the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and Bill of Rights, and shove them up your ass, because freedom really means when a man or a woman comes out and says, I'm going to the art center. So have you got a pass? What's a pass? There are no passes. You don't have to kiss anybody's ass. You just go. He's going to the machine shop. He wants to go there. He wants to use the National Machine Shop. She wants to use National Chemistry Lab. She wants to use National Geophysical Facilities, and they're there for your use. You don't have to pass any crew or kiss the ass of the director or get by the board. You just go there. So people, if you could arrange that, will not talk to each other very much. And I wanted to say this, and I repeat myself many times when I try to say that the only reason people talk to each other is because it's something they want. They have tremendous needs. They say, nobody listens to me. And you say, oh, they know how awful, and then they go on yakking away. So if people were able to express themselves, they wouldn't talk. Conversation is based upon lots of adrenaline and tremendous frustration. Well, people are frustrated, so they sit there yakking away, and society loves that. That's why they have debating teams and all that. Because people get up and they debate. They give them things to debate about. They yak away at each other, and people laugh continuously. And nothing happens. The world's still the same. Or you get up and say the rights of the immigrants to come to America, or should the Filipino be permitted to live in an apartment house with the wasps? What kind of debate is that shit? I mean, all of this shit should have been ironed out 10,000 years ago, so that man can pursue whatever direction, so long as that direction, to our knowledge, does not have any severe negative effects on other people. So long as you don't go around and get your kicks out of burning people, injecting them with sulfuric acid, so long as you don't get your kicks that way. So we feel that a democratic society is dangerous. We feel that a competent society, meaning if people can stay away from personalities, which is the #1 problem. I don't like the way she wears her hair. If you can stay away from that subject, or she's going to the same guy for 3 weeks and she goes out with another, if you can stay out of that conversation, that's the most difficult thing to learn. Those are the conversations that generate trouble. Do you like me better than you like somebody else? Am I the best guy you've ever been with? And we're always comparing ourselves. Why do you have to be the best? Everybody wants to be a little god. I can broad jump a greater distance than anyone in the room. I can high jump over a higher thing. So what? You see? An ant can carry a load 9 times its weight with great ease, 100 times its weight. So we are mostly involved in conversation that have no meaning. Let me say that again. 90% of the conversation that normal people have no meaning at all. And what it is a relief of tension. But it doesn't really relieve the tension because the problem's still there when they leave. They say, it was nice talking to you, and they go home with the problem. The problem is that they had to talk to you. That they had to come over and say, Jesus, my boss has been bending my ear about doing this and doing that. If the boss situation is so lousy, why should I come home and tell you about it? The bosses do this, and then they do it, and they say, change his mind, so now I'll do it that way. How can you live with a boss like that? Don't tell me about a miserable situation if you're my friend. If you're my friend, don't tell me about you got water under the kneecap and it hurts. Go to a fucking doctor who can take the water out of your kneecap or reset it. I can't. Come to me when there's something I can do about it. So people come to you because you're sitting there. What they need is a dummy sitting there. A dummy made of celastic. And they say to the dummy, my husband doesn't understand me at all. And the eyebrows move to this side. Isn't that awful? That's a shame. And you say, and let me tell you, furthermore, after he has an orgasm, he rolls over and goes to sleep. He pays no attention to me at all. I said, oh, isn't that selfish? So the dummy can only say, that's all the dummy can say, those things. You know? So apparently, if the guy has an orgasm and rolls over and goes to sleep, that's their sense of equilibrium. Your sense is that he ought to put his arm around you at that time, telling you how much he really cares. But he really doesn't care that much. He cares more for sleep. That's the truth. So you have to say, apparently, he says so many sweet nothings prior to the orgasm, and then after the orgasm, he says, no sweet nothings anymore. Nothing. How much he needs me. He doesn't need you after that. Now, if you can't accept that, that is the illness. Is it, but is it fair? Nothing's fair. The word fair has no meaning. So stop looking for justice. The people that look for justice wind up in a mental institution. They've been conditioned to feel that it's only fair after I helped you jack up your tire, car and change your tire, you would at least help me when I get a flat. So I call you, you say, you got a flat? Too fucking bad. And I say, but didn't I change your flat? You say, that's a fact. How come you're not going to help me change mine? That's because I'd rather do other things. You say, you selfish son of a bitch, that doesn't have no meaning. Click the hangout thing. Now the point is, the point of the normal conversation is murderous. Now, I find that people wonder at other people all the time. He could have at least called me up and said, happy birthday. At least that. Or sent a card, any card, even that card. But nothing. Ain't nothing. If they send you nothing, it means that they have priorities. Their own priorities. Whether it's going fishing or playing the mandolin or anything, that's their own priorities. And if their priorities do not coincide with yours, obviously you're going with a person with a set that doesn't coincide with yours. So if I go out with a guy and say, how about going sun flying for us? She says, you wouldn't get me near a plane. That's terrific. So I go to her. Then the wing comes off and I'm in a wheelchair. And she says, oh, I'm sorry to hear about the idea. I said, that's the consequences. Then I'm well adjusted. If I got a steel brace on my neck and can't turn my head that big, it says that was a terrible crash. It says, look, when you fly upside down, try to pick up a handkerchief. This is the consequence. That's a well-adjusted stunt flyer. But most stunt flyers are idiots. They wind up in a wheelchair like that. And they say, I shouldn't have done that. Anything else? The point is that people are so poorly educated that they can't handle difficult situations. Okay? All right, now, you run into these problems continuously. The psychologist can't really help you because the psychologist doesn't control the environment. He's always got his pigs. You know, like even a dog trainer. You want your dog trained, you got to send him to the dog trainer. The dog trainer has an environment. When the dog shits on a rug, he gets a shock and never shits on rugs. But you don't have an environment that you can send anybody to. These lectures, all they do is give you words and they give you general direction. Now you've got to go home and read and practice. Otherwise, you'll never make it. You can have these sessions for 20 years and get nothing out of it. If you think you can come here and I'm going to turn this verbal crank and you're going to walk out sane, you're out of your mind. You got to work like a son of a bitch. You got to turn around and say, I don't like his fucking beard. You don't know how to use YouTube. And the bigot says, what do you care about his beard? It doesn't bother you. Now, the whole idea that I attack your beard is so low grade that you ought not to engage in conversation with me. And when Big turns, you says, did you let him get away with that remark about your beard? You don't pay attention, Big. You light your cigar, you go on like it, because it doesn't matter whether a person likes your beard or not. You understand? And if you have 9 hooks in your nose, like that, and you're a very pleasant person, and I bring you home to meet my mother says she has 9 hooks in her nose, and I say to my mother, my God, you have none in yours. See what I mean? The whole idea of mother, fuck mother. If she's wrong, if dad is wrong, or your brother is wrong, fuck her. They're out. They either give them the same treatment that you give anybody else, otherwise you have no concern for people. You have contempt for people if you don't speak the truth. If I go and I listen to your mother yanking away, if she does and she's wrong, if I listen and say yes, 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 I have contempt for her. But if I move and say, by the way, I'm not interested in that. I don't agree with you. He says, you don't? I says, that's a fact. Then I have concern for your mother. If a person loves you, they attack you when you're wrong. Not with anger. They attack you and tell you, look, there's no way to fly upside down. You have to do it this way and that way. Show you how. In other words, if you're doing biological, if you're doing dissection and your scalpel is going in and out, cutting too deep, and I say, that's no way to do it. You're clumsy, you're sloppy. Those are emotional words. But if I say, if you use your finger, when you pull that scalpel and then set it, and then ride your finger, it's only going to go in a certain depth. That's called a process level. So in the future, people will use a process level. In other words, if you make a bad drawing of a person like this, and when I say bad, anatomically incorrect, instead of saying that's a bad drawing, you say the nose is pretty good, we generally lengthen this area and we split it about the mid-region and we make the eye a little smaller. Then when they do this, and the eye is that small, you say, pretty good, now you're moving along. Don't say it's still wrong because they don't know what's wrong. Say the eye is a little small, the rest is great. So there's no, my God, you failed. Nobody fails in school. You know, you ask them 25 questions and they answer 12 correct. Don't say you failed. Say you're about 50% correct. But they use words like, how'd you make out? He failed his exam. I can't understand that at all. Schools would be wiped out in this new system. All the school teachers would be pulled right out, sent back for re-education of a new value system where they learn how to talk about areas, not wiping you out. Like I said before, if you spell cat with a K, instead of saying it's wrong, we substitute a C where the K is. And if he turns the C the wrong way, kid, you say you're much closer. We generally turn it this way, but not wrong. Okay? No one is wrong. No one makes mistakes. I never made a mistake in my life. I never did anything wrong because they don't recognize the term. If you want to use the term wrong, say Dr. Ehrlich did 606 wrong experiments before he came up with some control of syphilis. So the book is called 606, 606 experiments before he got results. Was he wrong all the other times? There's no way for you to learn how to row a boat unless you use the oars the wrong way. And then you eventually, what they call wrong way. And then eventually you know how to move the oars to get movement. So you've gone through insufficiencies and picked up your insufficiency. Is that all right? So the first time you did some verbal reading in a play, he went that way, sir, and then he returned with anger. And they say, not that way. And you go over and over again until you can handle your lines. But instead of saying you're a lousy actor or you're a lousy verbalist, say you need improvement in this area, that area, the other, but you don't put a person down. Now, all our lives, you put people down. And you don't have to put people down. You can say that that this area can be polished or this area needs modification. That language can never separate people if you use that kind of language. We separate and we run into conflict. We think people don't like us and disagree with us. It's only because the language has inherent anger in it. You get it from your movies, your books, your newspaper. You know, young girl runs amok, shoots everyone in town. You know, but that kind of stuff in newspapers make us sick. And we spank our children. We hit the little boys. You never hit your little sister. Like that. And we can't seem to get around changing people by using a new system. Yes.
If a person hasn't been appropriately reinforced for giving feedback or being what you call straight, then how is it that they are having contempt for the other person if they haven't been conditioned? Contempt would imply responsibility for their behavior.
I'm only using the word contempt in the sense that it would mean that you're not concerned with another person by not trying to show them the way out of their problem rather than condemn them for having a problem. In other words, if your paintbrush is too loaded with paint that drips on the drawing, I would say, well, you're a student, and if I don't show you how to make that change, it means that I have contempt for you, and I consider my own time of such importance that I'm not going to take time out to show you how to overcome that. See, that would be contempt in that sense, meaning not concerned about you.
But a person could be concerned, but if they don't have the appropriate tools to give
then
feedback.
they can't have concern.
Oh, I get
If
it.
I wanted to service you a Volkswagen because you're having great difficulty, I don't know anything about Volkswagens, then that doesn't mean it.
But you should really throw out the words concern and contempt because
Absolutely.
they imply.
All those words,
Right.
we run into trouble because the words themselves, and even if we spoke a very similar language, all of us, and our backgrounds are different, I'm going to hear you differently. I'm going to interpret what you say my way, and I'm going to be mad at you for something I think you did, which you never did, and you're surprised. And this happens all the time. So if you can maintain an attitude of inquiry, which is what it's all about, inquiry. Suppose you shave an area on the middle of your head and you got a sunspot there, see? Like that. And I say, you know, Martina, what is the function of that? You say, well, as they found a new area of the brain, when the sun hits it, it improves the neural associative system. I said, well, but I say, but your boyfriends wouldn't like you. And I said, but you say significance. What? In other words, I would say that you're very well adjusted if you can do that. But,
If that were more reinforcing than the boyfriend.
well, it is. Would you say that, would you rather have a beautiful body, fantastic, whatever society calls beautiful, fantastic, excellent eyes, skin, magnificent, beautiful tits, legs, and there's the maximum voice, but cerebral jelly? Or a super crooked nose, teeth that stick straight out with the best cerebral development?
Which one?
The world is half
The
flat.
very fact that you have to think about it. See,
No, what I was thinking.
cerebral development.
No, what I was thinking about is the idea of it would be optimal if I could experience both extremes.
The other one is false. There's no both. There's only one. Man is considered the highest development in forms of evolution, and it's only because of cerebral activity. But the rest, in other words, I tried to say this at one session before, but a lot of people didn't get it, so we'll try it again. If you could have eyes that come out on tentacles here, they can sense the macro and microscopic world, see the moon real clear, but the eyes are out on tentacles, but well protected. Would you surrender your own eye system for that? How many of you would? One person.
Shall we two?
One.
The thing you said, the question you said before was my point of view is that since we are, as you say, organisms that respond to reinforcement, if I'm in a culture that doesn't reinforce the
The
second
word reinforcement is a bad word because
Was it super
and reinforcement implies that the thing is reinforcing. It may not be. It may be something you interpret as reinforcing, which may be detrimental to you. You know what I mean? If I serve you lots of apple pie and whipped cream and artificial sweeteners, you say, terrific reinforcement, then you lose your teeth and you go away, you disappear. So what normal people call reinforces may not be that. Reinforcement is a very funny word.
First of all,
Skinner says that
reinforcement
the
has
thing
nothing
presses
to
a
do with
lever that's reinforcing. It's reinforcing to Skinner. The animal would rather get the food without pressing the lever.
Well, Skinner says that the reinforcement has nothing to do with what the person is experiencing. If I say I
That's
like
right.
something, does not mean that it's reinforcing.
But in the person's head, they
Right.
interpret it that way. And that's what we have to deal with, because that's the way people see it. They're not able to put that degree of shading in the thing. Skinner ought to take them more by the hand and go easier. It's going to take a longer time. All right, this bit here. Now suppose your nose disappeared and there became a disc there that can sense all the world shades of gray of olfactory systems. You can smell airplanes, anything you want to smell, but you have a round, circular nose. No, very few people would settle for it. So I would say this, people are hung up on their configuration. Do you understand? And they invest so much in that area, that's why they get sick. The real problem is this. I want to try to show you, since you're relatively new, I want to try to show you what a problem is and what a solution is. And a solution has no meaning because the person doesn't know what a problem is. Oh. Let's say you go to visit another planet. We'll call it Planet Z. And you say, you come there and you say, Jesus Christ, I don't see any cities. You said, welcome to our city. I don't see any cities. He said, well, of course not. We are like 8,000 years in advance, technically, of your people. He said, well, what about weather when it rains? Well, we electrically control the rain so it never falls on the dwelling area. He said, well, the guy says, I don't see anybody. Well, we don't need a roof because the rain and sun stops at this force shield. He said, well, you got no fucking furniture. You just sit on nothing, on a field force, you know, light a cigar. You're floating. Any place you want to sit. If you want to orient yourself this way, you can. That's a very advanced society. He said, well, where's your light? You say, pick up a book. You pick up a book and it's illuminated. You don't need a light. Oh, no, you're going to say, but I still want an 80 grand piano. He said, look, move your fucking fingers. And you get all the music you want. He says, but there's no piano. Don't worry about it. We can't do that. We can't make that kind of adjustment. Because we are thing-oriented. Now, in the early days, I don't know if you remember, before the microfilm file, it took a building, you know, a mile long to store information. Now with microfilm, with Kodak, they even got better things than that today. You can store all that information in a cubic yard. Now, what's happening to things, you might have a keyboard in the future in your home, just a keyboard. And that keyboard will be connected to a socially integrated music center. You got a whole sound system built in your room. When you play, that can sound like a church organ, a piano, a symphony orchestra, anything you want it to sound like. What do you want a fucking piano for? Very limited. Let me show you what I mean. You, instead of learning a foreign language, you sit at your typewriter, you type. Well, let's say you type a letter, and it'll translate into Spanish or Greek right away. It's way up to learn Greek. And when you talk English into a speaker, it comes out in Greek for the other person. So why go to school and study a language? Language will be obsolete just the next few years studying foreign language. Because it'll be an interpretive computer. You just say, how are you, Sam? And he says in English, how are you? Whatever he speaks. And so you don't need all that burdensome complication. So the people of the future have no nicety. They don't say good morning. Because they always say good morning. Whether it's storming, lightning, earthquake, they say, I'm happy to see you. You know, they're not happy to see you. You know, they're not overjoyed. If you measured them, they would not be happier. Oh, I'm happy to see you. It's the same, it's just words. Oh, I'm so sorry that you had an accident. Oh, your cat died. They don't give it. They don't know you cat. So people have so much language, and you're living in a primitive society. This is the tail end of the Middle Ages. And it's a shameful period. And the most shameful period in the history of man now. Nixon finished it off. It's so low grade that beyond that, you know, nuclear war will make it worse. But it's pretty hard to get worse. So when I say your schools are not worth a shit, it's because they're immersed in this culture. And the education that they give you are essentially contaminated by all elements of the culture. Sometimes your psychologists, your professors at school, they have antagonisms toward one another. Oh, that, yes. And they're all angry in drama and theater. You know, they have the same feeling. Cameramen say, hey, he's not a good cameraman. Always fighting each other. So don't worry about the other guy. He's not a good cameraman. What's your insecurity about? Go out and take your fucking photographs. Click, 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 click. And if you're a lousy photographer, why should I say you're a lousy photographer? I could say this, that he doesn't use lights in such a way as to bring out contrast and form. He doesn't know how to produce shaded effects. But I go over you and say, by the way, you might increase the shading effects this way. That's the language of the future. The language of the present is that he built a lousy boat. The language of the future is that it's top-heavy, or you work with the person and show him how to collaborate. Then when he says, you're smart, then you show him a photograph of all the top-heavy boats you built before somebody told you about it. That's the future. So everybody's a fuck-up. Everybody makes mistakes if you want to use that kind of language. But everybody, in order to become smart, you have to be dumb. You have to go through a lot of things to become able to do anything else. Do you remember when you first sat at the piano? One finger? No. And then they say, when did you learn to play? Was it Saturday morning? It was so slow that you never know the day. When did you learn to speak Spanish? 8 o'clock Wednesday morning. It was so slow that you never knew when. So nobody learns anything at any time. when did you know you were in love with John? Well, here's when you knew you were in love with John. When you were a little girl, somebody showed you a photograph where your school teacher or some guy looked like this, and he was a wonderful person. And so you associate a wonderfulness with a pointed head, a slanted chin, all that. So when you went to your first dance and the guy that looked like whatever a wonderful person supposed to look like, you fell in love with. Like the, well, you got a particular tribe that have tremendously heavy lips. Now that's a sign of beauty. The Hottentots have a projecting butt, 10 inches out. And if it's 12 inches out, she's a doll. You know what I mean? And now that's the Hottentot form of beauty. So the guy, when he looks at other girls, he's only looking at the butt. There's no woman, there's just the butt. In fact, they even tie their butt to make it stick out like that. And they sometimes when they stick out a foot, they put a little kid on it so he can sit on it like he's riding horseback. And the mother says, you know, quit riding my ass. And she doesn't say it in that language, you know, but she does say that. And it would sound like that if it were interpreted for you. So what you've got to remember, that there is no beauty. These are all man-made concepts. You have lovely eyes. You have lovely skin. Well, if you have lovely skin, why do you go with a guy that has rougher skin? You say, well, he's a guy who accepts rougher skin on a guy, coarse skin. Because he's a guy. And you look at a girl, she has beautiful legs. You look at your boyfriend, you have hair growing out here, double hairs here, and say, well, he's manly. So they associate that with male. But if every time, you know, Greta Garbo crossed the legs and with lots of hair and all, and you push that, the girls would be ashamed of their non-hairless legs. Now, I'm just saying that our whole map of beauty has to be thrown out. All notions of beauty. So someday, we can receive any human being without saying, my God, her eyes are so small. Well, one eye is up, one eye is down. You know, instead of criticizing people and their configuration, we try to deal with them. Now that's where we allow stuff. And you're always trying to solve problems within the context of the present values. So let me give you an idea of how the future might deal with it. Like if you came to me and said, I don't get along with my mother. Well, what does that mean? Totally? 30%? 2%? Well, say you don't get along with your mother 80%. 80% of the areas.
But how can you say you don't get along with your mother 80%?
Up to that point.
I would say, but it's not a percent. It
really is.
When or how or in
all
what
right.
area?
In time. Let's say you're with her 10 hours. How many hours would you say in the 10 hours are not of use to you? You see? Now you're going to make a line here. And we're going to talk about relating. Like if you say to me, what's my mother like? I always say, in what area? Okay?
Mm-hmm.
She's a bigot, a racist, a good cook, late for appointments. Okay? No, that's the way you talk about people. I don't say I love my mother. This would be nonsense. Love my mother? That means everything she does is acceptable, fully wonderful? The word love has to be thrown out.
Well, but I think that not on a whole general universal basis does love today even does love mean that you accept.
I never knew what love meant. What does it mean? Is it a form of directed prejudice toward one person?
It means one thing to me, but it might mean another thing to you.
That's right. So since it has no specific meaning, how can you deal with it?
I can deal with what it is with you.
Well, now suppose you were a chemist, and every time you read some of the symbolic configurations, and you did your own thing with it, everybody would be dying that you treated. If you were a pharmacologist, and you did your prescriptions your own individual way. You see? Now language, if it permits variations of interpretation, it'll crucify others. Now if you learn to fly, and I tell you to put the plane in the 15-degree descent at 15 degrees, and your concept of 15 degrees is that, well, I'm an individual. I'm going to respond exactly like you say. Well, the Army can't tolerate that. The Army in this area is right, just this area. When they start peeling off the dive bombing, this guy says peels off a little extra. He's off target. So the Army can't afford to let you, when the Blue Angels do barrel rolls together, they don't have any individuality. I mean, their wings are tied together with a 3-foot string, and they never break it. They can barrel roll, take off together. They all move as one plane. You ever see that? Fantastic sight. You see, in terms of, surely people can't all be alike. I'd rather they all be alike. See, what we want in the future is that everybody be alike. And here's what that means. They all look the same, identical. And there's no male, no female, but they're halfway between the systems. So you look just like he does, see? Or it's a he and she, or you're a he and she in the future. And so when you look at each other, you've got to relate to each other. You have the same voice. Somebody says, I like your voice. Now, why do you like the voice? Have you met a person with a raspy voice? How are you, Sam? And he always gave you ice cream and chocolate touches in the movies. And you met a person with a beautiful voice, whatever that is to you, and they were mean and hostile, you would like the gurgly voice. You understand that? So there's no beautiful voice. Well, I'm saying that if we bring up people with a very hard value system, so that they can only deal with what's in the cranial case. See, that's why right now they're worried about should Jews go with Polacks, should Negroes associate with white folks, you see. Well, they're worried about that level instead of the cerebral hemispheres. I say that in such concepts as functional priority, you disassociate yourself from a white man, a Negro, a Polack, a Swede, or a Jew because of the differences in values, never because of the skin color, or color of the hair, or eyes, or even sloppy mannerisms. Let's say that this man was one of the finest surgeons in the world, and every time he ate, he drooled back in the plate, you know, when he was eating. And a lot of saliva flowing in. Now, I did research, and it did him no harm at all. In fact, he developed a lot of antibodies that way. I said, I got to learn how to drool into my plate. You see, but instead, we become conditioned. You see, we don't want to touch things that don't touch my food. You know, just serve it. The cook touches all the food in a restaurant. He squeezes it, you know, takes the onions out, he peels it, touches everything. And if somebody drank from a certain cup, you know, you won't drink in a restaurant. Everybody's pissed off. But you'll kiss anyway. Well, the oral cavity is a great breeding ground. All kinds of microorganisms. But this guy won't drink out of a cup because a little lipstick's hanging on. But if you tell him it's Gina Lola Bridges, let's say, he says, these are the prejudices I'm talking about. So we're so full of prejudices because of our language. Our language inherently has in it the loused-up structure. Now, how are you going to depart from that language? How do you walk over to a person's house and say, will you do this Wednesday, something you want to do? And they say, no, I'm not interested. Then you go through a series of alternatives, and they say, I might consider this. Call me in the morning and I'll let you know. You see, you never do what I want to do. You're always doing what you want to do. So you get into that shit. If I say, hey, let's go to a bullfight. I'd like to tackle a bull for one, and you can tackle it for one. He says, you can tackle it, I'll watch. Well, I'm not interested in bullfights. I'm not going. So I go like this. He said, why are you pouting? You never go where I want to go. You always do what you want to do. Let the person go wherever the hell they want to go. Understand? Stop. Well, what we do, unless you're talking about social direction, then you can't let people go where they want to go. You have to orient them. If you want to grow more food on earth, you have to use the best agricultural techniques known. And you have to school people, train them, give them background so they can function. I know it's awfully difficult for you people to understand, but you look alike every day. When you get up and look in the mirror, it's the same person. If every day you walked over to a mirror, you look different Saturday, you know, and then Wednesday you were short and a little bit, and Thursday you had a giant cranial case, you see? And Friday your eyeballs are down here, see, smaller. And Dino, I said, Dino, Jesus Christ, you know, you change every day. So I wouldn't want to look alike every day. Good God, that would be horrible. You wake up in the morning and see the same goddamn Dino in the mirror. He said, no, that's the way people would talk if they changed every day. But they do change every 7 or 10 years. They change considerably. But if it happens suddenly, they'd be annoyed because the change is so slow. Well, I'm just saying to you that what we really want is the best physical condition possible all our lives, as long as we live. We want to not get out of bed in the morning, we want to spring out of bed. We want to see well all our lives and hear well and have love of life all our lives. We don't want to go through this process. Yeah, son, have a good time. We don't want to go through pains. We don't want to go through failing vision. Say, I can't quite recall that old shit that you see in the movies. We don't want any of that. We all want to be uniformly healthy. We want to be smart. We want to be able to see well. I want to hear sounds that you can hear in music. I want to see the colors you can see. I can't see color as well as you can. I want to be able to visually discriminate. So I want medical engineering to come into the fold in the future. I want it to come into sharp focus, where they can do biological engineering, genetic restructuring, rebuild the retina of the eye, the cones, control them so I can see color not nearly as good as you, but equally as good as you. But I want every human being to have a sharp memory, fast mentally, be able to hear a range of sounds and enjoy color, the widest range of color, not little less than me because I can be top man. I want to be able to run over a fence that's 11 feet high and jump over it, and then go like this to you, and he jumps right over. Then I stop challenging him. When he stands up like that and blindfolds himself and tilts his head and he's still standing up, then we stop that. I can do this, you can't do that. So we want everyone to have maximum performance. That's what you really want, only you don't know it. When you buy whatever you buy, whether it be a Mercedes or a Rolls Royce, you don't want that Rolls Royce to be pretty good. You want it to be the best engineering can give you. When you flip your TV set on, you want the best programs you can enjoy with the sharpest color, without color overlapping and lines fading. But I don't want Bettina to have a set not quite as good as mine. I want her to have a set as good as we can turn out. I don't want to see cheap automobiles on the highway. I want to see the best automobiles the world's engineers can collectively design for man, of stainless steel, titanium, superb quality. I don't want to see levels of humans, ditch diggers, and people who clean out cesspools. I want to see the best in men. And just prior to engineering that, we have to still enable people to give them aids. So children that are born insufficient or damaged should be given maximum courtesy by society, given special aids. In other words, we build a city for the blind with their sonar devices and they can walk and there's no cars, and they can sense a chair by sound feedback. In other words, we feel that every human being with less than the best in sensory mechanism ought to be given assist, just like eyeglasses or assist devices. And if you had a failure of the kidney, I don't want you going around with a kidney machine. I want a synthetic kidney that can be placed into you and give you the same agility and behavior that you had before, the optimal. Now, most people don't know this. They all want the optimal. You want the best eyeglasses that can be turned out. So when you start thinking about our old value systems, I like the way I look. I don't want to look like everybody else. I would lose my individuality. Well, all you have today is difference in appearance, but no individuality. We're all alike. As you know, people always say the same thing. Can you meet? Pleased to meet you. So how do you know that? You don't even know. In other words, you go right on saying the same thing. Isn't it so? Don't people practically say the same thing? All right, so if we're to make progress, when I use the term progress, I'm talking about referential change. The only way we can do it is by altering the environment that man is in, including the genetic environment, the physiological environment. So when I get up and make such statements as someday everybody will look alike, if that bothers you, what bothers you means that you've been brought up to take pride in your hair and your beard, you see what I mean? In your configuration. But the idea is to get away from that, if you can ever do that. Then, as you get older, let's assume you're now 60 years old, assuming you're that much wiser, and I say, how would you like to go back and be 18 again? Repulsive. I was a jerk at 18. How about 13? Horrible. I was another person. So as you get older in the future, you look forward to the process level that occurs in the cerebral hemispheres. Instead of a lot of our people today, you know, at 30 years old, they stop. They get married, settle down, have kids, and they sit there, and the brain stops at 30. And they keep looking back when it was 22. Those were the days. Yeah, the war days. We killed those goddamn guys. See, they live in the past. And so we want the future to be the thing that people dwell on. And the whole idea would be, in the future, that if you met a person that was up on things, they would always be modern to you. That you wouldn't look at your parents as square. They wouldn't know what square is because they're moving all the time. Why do people stop moving? Does anybody know? What kind of factors are involved? You volunteer the answers? Why do people stop? It's called arrested development. Anybody want to volunteer an answer? What makes them stop?
I think one of the things is that the environment that they're in doesn't stimulate further advanced, there's a lot of inhibitory factors in the environment.
Like what? Can you lay it out, spell it out a little more?
Well, yeah. For instance, give an example. Can I give you an example of
Sure.
something? My cousin is the head administrator for aerospace. He's an engineer, industrial engineer, I think. And he told me that when he got out of Georgia Tech, he was very hot on human factors, and he was hot on doing all kinds of things in aerospace and everything else. Once he got into the groove, once he got a house, once he got his family, once he got locked into a position where he knew he had to pay the mortgage and everything else, he knew he had to fill a certain position, and that he couldn't go outside that position because there were people up who were ready to take his position just like that. And he got into the groove, and after a while, he said all that shit faded out, and he just goes to work and designs the fucking bolts for aerospace, and that's it, and he doesn't want anything else. So it's those kind of factors which move in on you and squeeze you into a
And that's a
groove.
fundamental physical description of the elements that stop a person. Is there anyone that doesn't understand that? If the society were an open society, an idea society, a think tank society, what do you think we ought to do with music? Any real, brilliant, broad, wild ideas? Let's try it. No one will ever say, hey, now wait a while, that's a little too far out. There's nothing too far out. We can try. So in music and all the creative fields, what you call creative fields, there'll be a tremendous amount of exploration. And I would say that from this point of view, being alive is the ability to change. And you feel most alive as you undergo change. And people who always tell you the same story all the time, my husband doesn't understand me, I don't know what the world's coming to, the youth today, they're crazy, you know. They have the same fucking story. They died in 1927. There's a lot of dead walking around. And that's why I don't believe in life after death, because there's no life during life. There's a living dead walking around. So when you tell me your Ebony Sneed died, he died a long time ago. So to be alive is to change. To feel alive. Well, the price is so great of losing income, you have to turn down jobs that might bring you a lot of money. You have to step out when it begins to get to a certain level. You have to stop at some point. You know what I mean? There's a point where you get sucked into the system. So at some point, you struggle somewhere between these systems. And then also, if you keep changing, if your friends don't change fast enough, you lose them. So there's a lonely spot. I mentioned something yesterday, and I'd like to repeat it. The thalamus, hypothalamus, our feeling tone. We're brought up on a feeling tone level. This is our lives. We live for feelings. A sense of warmth, a sense of being wanted, the sense that somebody is concerned about you, the sense that you belong to something or some group, a sense of pride. Now, this is what you're brought up with. And what I teach is to surrender all that shit. So if you learn all of this in the past, now you've got a logical mind, and there's no glory in it. There's no great sense of accomplishment and warmth. Now you're flattening out. You say, God damn it, I'm going to have a ball Saturday. So you go into an old thalamic world, and you play the guitar and drink, and you do whatever you have, and then you got living on a feeling tone level. So the more of this shit you learn, the more cortical you become. There's no feelings of reinforcement, because the reinforcement is not in that system. You know, when a person walks over and says, like if you come to visit me and say, you know, you may use anything here, as you will. Then I walk out. Now that's all he wants, is to use the facilities. Now, if I say, oh, I'm so happy to see you, you can use the facility. Use the facilities of what the person wants. You're not happy to see a person, but you tell them to use the facilities. It's a way of saying, what I have is yours, if you want to work it that way. Now, if I go into his shop and I use a saw the wrong way, what I had was yours. Because the saw doesn't work. So what you have to do is between the systems, you have to teach a person or assist a person in learning how to use the facility. You can't just go and do it. So if you were able to take on cortical behavior, rational stuff, you'd be terribly lonely and a tendency toward depression if you came into this system too heavy. So what you have to do is play your guitar outside your girlfriend's window, if that's what you have to do, until you no longer have to. And stroke her hair and tell her how beautiful she is, until you no longer have to do that. But don't lie to yourself. Don't say Fresco wouldn't like it. Fuck Fresco. Do what you have to do. Feel as you have to feel until you no longer do that. Now, I want to say one more thing. Whenever I give a little child a train, a child from a scarcity area, a little toy train, he jumps for joy. I got a train! He's jumping like mad. And this man is studying medicine. I give him a brand new microscope. And he grabs my hand and says, I deeply appreciate it. And I said, well, you're not jumping or anything. You have no feelings at all. But what happens to people is, the deeper your feelings, the less you emote. Isn't that interesting? The people that are always weeping and screaming have very little feelings. They're superficial. When you go to a movie, you see movies of the starving people of Africa, swollen bellies, and you're weeping, wringing out your handkerchief and weeping. The guy that, when he leaves that theater, takes some money out of the bank, buys care packages, and ships them out to Africa, that's the way to weep in the future. But don't sit there wringing out your fucking handkerchief, because that's inexpensive. Because when you get through wringing it out, you say, let's go for a cocktail. That's what I mean by superficial. So caring in the future is a cortical action pattern. It has nothing to do with there. Whenever you're suffering great misery, like there, that's shit, bullshit, okay? So we got to get away from all, but a lot of us need there. So when you're back in the hospital, Harry, you're working with people, say, oh, I've suffered so much these past few months. Put your hands together and say, there. Because they don't know the other language. Don't say, what function is that? You know, don't do that. Administered to them is called tender loving care, because this is where people are at. So, but while you're doing that, try to change them. Don't just come at them in a new way, say, you know, what can I do about that? Yes.
Okay, if like growth means change and perceiving differences.
You will feel most alive when you do it.
In a society that you're talking about, where people are looking the same and they think they have a general
That's
attitude
ultimate.
of looking at the world, how can change be perceived?
In the future?
Yes, under your system.
Because definition of change would mean simplification of orientation in relation to the physical world.
Could you explain what you mean by that?
That would mean that in order for me to get to California, I've got to get in a car and drive or a covered wagon. Now I fly. Now I could go to California if I had closed-circuit TV. Say I had a full-size screen, the size of the wall, and I flip a switch and get a 3D picture of something I want to see out there. Okay? So I don't go to California anymore. Because Bettina says, yeah, you can see a 3D picture, but you can't walk on Malibu Beach. And that's why I go to California. But if we can get into visual simulation systems where I can walk on Malibu Beach, I'm not going to California. If you can play into my head that I am walking on Malibu, and I feel the wet sand, and I see the little sand frogs, and the sandpipers running along the beach.
But you could just stimulate your brain then.
Now that's what it's all about. What I want to tell you is that the world on the outside lands on the retina and winds up in the visual cortex.
So you would eliminate the external world.
Now that is not something people are about to sit back and accept.
That's the conclusion. I mean, that's the...
Yeah, but if you don't understand that the world exists in your head anyway, okay? Now, if you can play that into a person who says, and how would you like to travel to Ceylon? $1.50. Sure, he's now in Ceylon. He sees the people of India and everything else, and he's tired of walking around. Now, Richard says, I wouldn't want that. He can't say that, because he's never sat in an image environmental simulator. That's the trouble with a lot of people. Say, I wouldn't get in an airplane, I just look down, I get dizzy. You don't get dizzy when you look down. They've never been in a plane. You see? There's a lot of people that make a lot of statements, I wouldn't want to live in your kind of world. You think they've lived in it and came out saying it was terrible. The point is this, that I can't make a simulator. But they have made simulators up to a point. How many of you here saw Cinerama when it first came out? All right. How many of you remember the loop as it went up, and then when it went down, you felt it in your stomach? Do you remember that? You really felt it in your stomach. Did you feel it in your stomach? Those of you that saw it? Now that's a little bit of simulation. But when the wind blows and you smell the salt air of the sea, and the bird flies right over you, can feel the wind of the bird's feathers. That's what I mean. Not this shitty television where you look and you can't see the guy in the background. That's not simulation. That's crude. All the stuff you've got in your house, hi-fi, all that's crude. But the world I'm talking about, we are moving toward, whether you like it or not. We are moving that way. So you might as well learn what it means. It doesn't mean giving up anything. It just means giving up the idea I tell you this, suppose you're a very important person in the future, important to people, because they consider you part of themselves. And let's say that you're up in a flying machine and it crashes. They suffer a tremendous loss in the future. So they really care. So what they do is they build a simulator that simulates the same structure you have and keeps the structure in duplicate. In other words, they build biological duplicates. So if your plane crashes, your cerebral set is in the duplicate. So you still come home and say, how are you, sir? If you don't know what that means, in the early days, a test pilot used to get in an airplane, and they say, all right, put it through 9 Gs, and they died. He said, the wings are coming off, you think, and that was the end of SAM. It took years to make SAM. So all I want to do is put the test pilot on the ground with video equipment in the plane. I said, put it through 9 Gs, and he puts it down. He says, the wings are coming off. He says, it sure is. But he's still all right. I don't want anybody up there testing an airplane. If we can run a spaceship to the moon automatically and bring it back, don't put a human being in a race car. When it hits the wall, bursts into flames, if you want to thrill those jackasses watching that, put a robot in there and have the guy sit there and look out the windshield, make the turn, squeaking around, but nobody gets hurt. See? So the future, you'll do exercise, you'll swim, but you'll never get hurt. And you can't get hurt if you design a world in which people, well, the reason we don't want people to get hurt, there's a reason for that. No more than you want me to come to your house and pick up a record and throw it on your record player and push the arm down into the record. You don't want the record abused, I don't think. You don't want me sitting on your piano, banging on it, and cutting the strings. You want those strings, you want them permanently tuned, don't you, really? So what you really need, on each string of the piano, you need a pressure transducer. And as you play the piano, if it's off pitch, the tension increases automatically. You don't want a tuner coming in. You think you want a tuner coming in because you never heard of another system. So we think that the future offers a lot of interesting systems. But there are a lot of people who come to these sessions that can't quite make that step. They say, well, I like what Fresco said up to here. They're 1927 people. Many people say, I'll go along with them up to 1980, but 1987, man, he's gone a little too far. And another guy says, I agree with 1987. But beyond that, he's wrong. You see, so everybody will always get off where they're at. Do you know what I mean by that? When they made the covered wagon, the guy said they've gone too far. Then when they had the jet, turbojet, they've gone too far. And the guy would be riding in a turbojet, and he'd see that experimental ultrasonic job. He says, too far. It's never too far. You're too far back. See, everybody's too far behind. And you have to learn how to say this. I can't make it. This is as far as I can go. I am unable. If you took me and put me in the future suddenly, invited me to his home where there was no furniture, and I was sitting on nothing in particular, I said, look, I appreciate your kindness and consideration, but I miss all those things because cerebrally I'm not adjusted to it. Have a pleasant future for yourself. I'm going back to the past. But there's nothing wrong with the future. The trouble with us is we say, I wouldn't want to live in that cold, terrible scientific world of the future. That's the bullshit artist talking. And the artist is full of shit as a Christmas turkey because he always sits back and says, the man should live on a feeling tone, a sensitive tone. Well, he's still riding the same old track for years. And the artist and the literary student is unable to make the transition. That's why he still likes William Shakespeare and still reading the old shit. You ought to be reading new stuff by now. And the people in classical music are still playing Bach, Brahms, and Beethoven, and Wagner, and all these people. Well, we should have musicians today that can outproduce those people by far, far greater, because they have more to work with, more instrumentation, broader knowledge of sound and acoustics. But the art world has been dragging its ass, like the ballet, the theater, all of that's dragging its ass. So we want to build a new art world with new music forms and change everything so that there's no area except the classical paintings. We hope to build museums in the future and have Rembrandt and Michelangelo in the old part of the museum. And as you move on, you'll see the painters in 1927 and 1965, and it'll go on and on. It'll make Rembrandt look like shit. There are artists today that are so superb that they can draw a gnat's asshole with virus crawling out of it. In other words, if Rembrandt was crude and vulgar, I mean, and I would like to see all the old paintings and all the old literature in the old museum. And so when you go to the museum, you keep moving up to the future. And then there's a museum dedicated to the future. So you can really move. And even that museum of the future, every time you go there, you see, I never saw that before. And there's a new wing added, you see? And it starts out with the amoeba, the museum. And it goes through primitive cavemen and everything else. But you never hold up the Mona Lisa year in and year out. You put that shit where it belongs. But whatever the hell Da Vinci caught in that, people today are far more capable. Now, there's an artist called Russell. Do you ever see his work yet? Porter. Russell W. Porter. Some scientists looked at his drawings and they said, this drawing should not be in a museum. It should be at the Bureau of Standards under glass in the Department of Weights and Measures as an achievement. See? Now, nobody even knows who Russell W. Porter is. Nobody knows who Mel Hunter is. Mel Hunter can paint a rock with a crack on it. And if you look into the crack, you can see seashell deposits. And if you put a lens to it, you can see fractures in the seashell. He can use color and shading in I would say, in 1/8 of an inch. He works with single fibers, which is fantastic. Mel Hunter. Now, there are illustrators today that can't get near a museum because a museum is operated by cannibals, reptiles of the past. So the schools are also operated by primitives. So I'm trying to introduce you into a new world, a new way of thinking, and I don't expect you to walk out with it. But I would appreciate the courtesy of trying to learn more about it and reject what you can't accept, question what you can't accept, but don't throw it out. Hold it in advance. If you can't quite agree with it, say, I don't know enough about it to make a decision yet. We generally go for coffee and Sambo's. If you want to join us, you're welcome to do so.